Wow, here we are for our last Mystery Monday for this one. This is our attempt at doing one month by month. And what we're doing is we're really exploring deep into some elements that are unique to many of you and helping you to reduce the seams and make the most of it. In this last lesson, we're going to be covering borders, and we're also going to go back to what seems like a simple one is triangles. And in working with triangles, we're going to break it down a little bit more and pair it up with some border options. Now we're going to look at first some Mystery Mondays with some fascinating borders. This was a Mystery Monday that we did with Ruby Jubilee. It's still a pattern that we carry in the store, and if you purchase that pattern from us at Inspired to Sew, it has the AccuQuilt instructions inside of it, as well as the specialty rulers. The reason this one's so unique for us is that it uses both an 8-inch and a 12-inch cube. But in the examples that you're looking at, our intent when we make a border, a pieced border, we're doing one of two things: using up the rest of our fabric and adding interest or enlarging it. So with this one in particular, our designer friend Amanda had put a border on just two sides. We finished that border where many of us extended it all the way around, enlarging our quilt and giving us a chance to use those elements up in the quilt. And as you can see, everybody did their own flair on it. And we also cover, like when we're doing a border, what do I do if I don't have enough fabric? And you'll see some of those featured in the quilts. Now this another one was called Chatsworth by Doug Lecco, and this one we are also offering as a class in the store. This is a great example of when you don't do the border all the way around. And you can see on these, Doug had this fascinating flying geese unit in those pieces, and we were able to put those elements around the outside edge to enlarge it. One of the people though that did it, I love how she handled it, is instead of doing that as a element in the quilt, she took those flying geese and she put them into her border around the outside edge of her quilt. Gives a totally different look. It's the same quilt entirely, and so it's a really neat way to look at this. Now we're going to go back and we're going to explore a few more of the Ruby Jubilee. Ruby Jubilee is a really fascinating one to do because it has blocks that are not just 8 and 12 inches big, but some of them are 10 inches, and it's a really great one to use up fabrics. These were some of the first ones that we did, and these are really nice, generous queen size quilts. Amanda's is a longer throw quilt. It's a taller one, but what we did by expanding it with these beautiful borders, we're able to get it out there to something that would cover a bed better, or the best part is use up the rest of the fabric. And you can see it was a great way to explore that negative space between the quilt piecing and that border. Now the next quilts we're going to look at are combining the genius of Deb Tucker from Studio 180 and Kay England. So we have combined 3 patterns from these 2 designers and put it into a fascinating setting. In fact, the outer border on the ones that I'm showing you is actually a quilt pattern in Kay's book Spikes and Peaks, and we used it as a border, but also it gave us a chance to add to enhance the designs that we put around that setting. So we used different blocks in this. We had a different center, and then we did those big setting triangles using Deb Tucker's pattern. Then we came back and did some bordering around it. Brought in some flying geese to make it taller if we wanted to do it that way. And you can see this one, I love it. It's a partial finish, but it's finished, and it's really fascinating. It adds interest to the quilt. Now the next ones that I'm going to show you are a pattern that's called Broken Star. And on these, what we did was I added in another pattern from book Layer 'em Up, which is from Cozy Quilt. And it's actually a whole quilt design, but what we did was all the scraps that were left over, we cut it up into elements and made this very modern looking border around the outside edge and literally used up all the fabric. And our goal for doing that is so that you don't have the frustration of what do I do with these leftovers. And as you can see in the original design, they had quarter square triangles around the outside edge. And then we added the other border for some people. For some people, they were done with it there. I love what Wendy did in this one. She added that border, but then she added some little friendship stars around the outside edge to enlarge it. And again, you see those stars being floated around the outside edge. Now the next quilts that we're going to look at are from Kay England, and it's a pattern called Remember Me. And this was, I love what this person did with her quilt. is that she didn't follow our pattern for setting. She did her own thing because that's how much fabric she had, and she wanted it to be a smaller quilt. And I like that because Mystery Monday affords you that chance and that latitude and that permission. And sometimes we do need that permission. Now, this is what the original quilt looked like, and I love the way this person put that border around the outside edge. It is the tiniest little 4 patches you've ever seen, and I believe she used it as her enders and leaders. Now, traditionally, a lot of times when we talk about borders, people get really wrapped up in what do I do with my panels. So we're going to cover one where Mystery Monday that we did, and we called it panel play. And so, this was Anne took a really great Christmas panel and went around it. This one is pairing up one of our patterns that we had done this year by using that border from Layer 'em Up. So you're starting to see people combine things. Now these next ones are ones that I had done with a pattern we called Lucky 13. We did it back in 2020, and I wanted to use up all that fabric. So I did a double border on this, and as you can see, my pinwheels and those other little things didn't go all the way around, but my parallelograms did. And this next one is one that one of our customers did, and she just cut things up into rectangles to finish it up. I think that's a brilliant finish for this, and it's a really great way to get it done, use that up, and then also to enlarge the quilt. So going back to some panel options, this next one is a panel option that we had explored, and it's one that is bringing in triangles. And so this is a hunter star surrounded with the leftovers with triangles. Here we're going back to panels. This is a beautiful way to create up a quilts of valor, enlarge those up to the sizes that they ask for those pieces. This Lynn went in and this is when she was mastering flying geese. And I love what she does with this beautiful hand-painted piece. And around the outside edge of this bike one, this bike panel, we've got a fascinating border that went around those pieces and then finished up with scraps around the edge. Now this one, the designer Melody had, she took this panel that was different sizes and she fitted it in with the elements that we were building out. Beautiful, simple way of putting some flying geese around it. When you get tired of making flying geese or when you decide you're out of fabric, move on and just enlarge it. This is Wendy's playing with multiples and again, different sizes of panels. And so she's working on fitting them around there with bordering. I like this one. This was combining Frances Cleveland with Puss in the Corner. This was a recent Mystery Monday that we had done. And I love the border that Wendy put around that. This is similar to the border that we're going to be exploring, where we're going to be exploring squares on point. This is a single square on point. And I adore this. Jackie loves working with K Facet, and this was like taking K's fabrics and making them more complex. Now this is the border that we're going to be exploring in this lesson, and it was one that we had done on a quilt that's called Backroads Drifter. We combined Judy Martin's blocks with Kay England's setting, and then we did this outer pieced border, and we pieced this border while we were making the rest of it. And so I'm going to show you the secrets of that in this lesson. It's really one of my favorite borders of all time, and it can, as you can see, it can afford, it's a triple border, and it's usually put together in an incredibly complex way, and we're going to simplify it for you that your mind is going to be blown when you see what we can do with this. This is Amy's quilt of this. This is one of her ones that she made with fabric that wasn't her favorite. And this has turned into one of her favorite Mystery Mondays. And I mean, you say that every time you do a Mystery Monday. The next one's going to be your most favorite. The next one is. And so thanks for being with us. Now this one shows some break apart of when we were building out that border. And you can see with this, Wendy uses all kinds of fabrics. And I think that's a really cool way to dig into this. Now this next part we're going to go into is I'm going to show you how you usually see borders done that are out there in patterns and publications. I typically don't show you the wrong way to do things, but I'm showing you this, not saying that it's wrong. It's just you now have skills after doing whether this is your first Mystery Monday or you've done multiple to move past these. And so we're going to work on some of these and show you these. Now this one is one where they show how to do a set on point, and what they do is they do it with squares and rectangles, and then they chop it off. The problem with this is you then get bias edges out there. So all of these that I'm showing you, they're very clever borders, but when they do that, they're putting a bias edge around the outside edge, and really stretching it can be enough with a border, but it's going to cause all kinds of problems if once you cut that off. And so we're going to be employing triangles and putting elements in there to fit them in, because you have skills to do this with triangles. And so as you look at these fascinating borders, I want you to be able to process it with me. This is something that we explore a lot in Mystery Monday, and I want to help to decipher this a little bit. As you look at patterns that are out there, you'll see a lot of patterns like this where they'll put this fascinating border together, but they have lots and lots of little triangles in there to put them together. And this is part of what I'm going to be breaking down for you to show you. These are fascinating borders, but they require a lot of half square triangles. And now that you have skills with squares on point and squares and rectangles and chisels and things like this, you have a wide variety of tools to go in here and do better with this. And so we're going to look at these pieces. I will not break all of these apart. I will in the future. If you're interested in seeing more of these broken apart, please send us an email, send me an email, and I will make sure I include that in further Mystery Mondays in the future. Now I'm going to break apart. This is a designer that did these adorable borders. These are tiny, 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 tiny borders. I don't even know if they're 4 inches tall, but they were so cute, and I love that they were in red and white. And these designs are adorable, and I want to show you how the designer told you to put it together. This is one, definitely this first one, that we're going to be breaking out for you. Now, you have better skills than to sew things together into 2 strips and trim them down. If you're still doing that, I'm going to encourage you to stop. The reason I'm saying that I want you to stop doing this, sewing 2 strips together and then trimming them down, is one, it takes you about 4 times or 5 times as much time to sew those strips together, press them, trim them, and then resew them. But the worst thing about it is that it is not accurate. If you cut them correctly and sew them correctly, you have a better chance of them being accurate, especially when we're going through some precision piecing techniques. I quit doing this a long time ago because generally, like a lot of people started saying to me when I started talking to them about this, yeah, I was always wondering when I put 3 strips together what I was supposed to do when those strips bowed out. You're supposed to cut them the right size and sew them together. I promise you, you will always get better results by doing that, and especially now with the techniques that we're working with you. Now, this next part, you can see what they're doing is they're putting these pieces on there. They hope that they're about the right size. I can see they're a little bit oversized. I didn't look at the original pattern on this, but they're oversizing them so that they can trim them down. Again, I see people do this, especially when we're on retreat, and don't feel bad if you're doing it, but because I know, some of you are afraid not to do it. But when you're cutting correctly, and especially, for those of you using AccuQuilt, you don't have to do this. You don't have to buy another specialty ruler to teach you how to get these to fit in there and trim them down to the little pieces. If you like doing tiny pieces like this, I would strongly encourage you to invest in the 4-inch cube. We've got best pricing for those. We always watch this. If you like doing little things like this, this is the cube for you, and it pairs up well with the other pieces in the cube family. So these are tiny little pieces. You can see that they're trimming down, and then what they're doing is they're sewing those squares on point together, and now they're showing you how to make those seams so they oppose each other. I'm going to show you how to instead do those little 4 patches with quarter square triangles in between them, so you don't have to do those things. And so that's a really interesting way of doing it. And as you can see with this, this is beautiful, but let's make it beautiful in much less time. And that's our goal today. This is not maligning this designer. She does amazing work, but I want everybody to be able to see incremental progress as you're moving along. And I want to reduce the amount of time it takes you to put it together. Now, she also put this one out there, and you can probably already see in the middle of that, if you want to do that, isn't that a square on point? Yes. So this is the border, the zigzag border that the designer put together, and I love how tiny it is. And I'm sure many of you right away, when you looked at that, you saw parallelograms. However, this is how the starting point that they put in there. So you're cutting these tiny little elements, 1.5 by 2.5 inches, and then you're going to go in and make these tiny little flying geese. Now, the size of these flying geese are the ones that are in the 4-inch cube. So if you want to make those, that's where it is. So again, we're cutting, we're ironing, we're pressing, we're trimming down, and we're getting those flying geese. So this could take you a long, long time going around something. Now note the parallelogram opportunities in here. However, not only the parallelogram opportunities, but instead of piecing those together with half square triangles, we could make those into using quarter square triangles, or even simplify it by just making double flying geese. We explored those a lot in there. This one cracks me up. This one is so funny. The recommendation is to pin this and use glue in there. Yikes. Yikes, yikes, yikes. If I have to use glue when I'm sewing, there's something wrong. But you know, the point well taken is getting those points to be accurate. But again, think about this. If this was sewn together with parallelograms and quarter square triangles, what could we accomplish? It's adorable border, absolutely adorable. And so in this one, the designer has put it together with pieces that are just as tiny. And again, all those pieces that you see in those elements are made with a 4-inch cube. Now this one, the bottom one, would have been made with an 8-inch cube. So you can actually pair those pieces together beautifully. So in this unit, we have flying geese is one of the things that I pointed out. This is a great time to discuss quarter square triangles and half square triangles. So if we have a flying goose, as I just mentioned, that is in these units, can be in these units, the goose is actually a quarter square triangle. The sky, which is on the left and the right side of the goose nose, is our half square triangles. However, in this example that this person presented, they made all of these with half square triangles. This is why it can be kind of confusing for you and for me sometimes, because a lot of designers will write just simply with half square triangles. One of my goals in Mystery Monday is to reduce the seams. And so in this one, you could have put it together as a flying goose unit and just sewn them together, or you can do the flying goose unit where you go half square in the corner, quarter square, and then another quarter square in the background and a quarter square. And so you could go all the way across and make this same border. One of the things that works with a quarter square triangle is you want to try to reduce those seams, those bias edges being raw out there. And that's why we're doing that first in a flying goose unit. So let's take a peek at the block that I put together to kind of help unpack this a little bit more. So the pink and the blue, aqua, and purple, those are all quarter square triangles, and you can see the flying geese in them. But as we look at the other parts of it, we're going to look at the other elements. So in the flying geese, the 4 of them that we have, those outer pieces were half square triangles. But in that center pinwheel, we're going to sew that together with smaller quarter square triangles so they fit together really well. And the flying goose, the pink and the blue and those, they don't even know that they're not up against a half square triangle. That's because if you look at those 2 tiny flying geese, tiny quarter square triangles in the bottom, those are 2 quarter square triangles being sewn together. Once we sew them together, that unit paired up becomes a half square triangle, just like the other side of the flying geese unit on the other side of that pink. Now the other beautiful thing about this one is we take that chisel that we've talked about, and the chisel, all it requires is putting a half square triangle on that. As you look at this block, the coloration of the block is going to be important in that what I have for that citron color, that yellowish green in there, it looks like a secondary block and it outlines the other pieces. And it actually, if you do the color the right way, it pops out more than the 4 flying geese units. Now this is an example that I pulled up, and as you can see, this one looks really muddy, so it's a great test block to look at, and it works, but it doesn't probably achieve what I'm trying to achieve in putting these together. Now this one hits it right on, spot on. As you can see, those overlaying pieces that I put in there before as 4 different colors, they did a much lighter medium, And then that background pinwheel just pops out at you because it's dark up against this. This one has some similarities. I love what they're doing here is when you're working with specialty rulers and AccuQuilt, you get a chance to play with color. And that's also why we recommend you don't cut out the whole thing at one time. You sew and cut a little bit. This one has a really dynamic impact, and you can see that gold behind, even though the little triangles are a little bit darker or medium. The yellow triangle on the back, the yellow pinwheel on the back, is very dynamic. Now this one's mine that I did, and it looks a little muddy, but what I tried to do was put in some mediums and lights for my triangles out in the front, and then I put a very dark navy on the back. And so let's explore what this looks like sewing it together. We're going to be putting together the units, and so first thing that I'm doing is I've got a little half square triangles, or quarter square triangles they put in there, and now I'm sewing my chisels in there. And I actually am sewing together all of the units, so I only sew on one sky of each of those big quarter square triangles. And so I have 3 units that I'm building. There's another chisel going in, and I start clipping them apart. Now these are those tiny little cut from a 4-inch cube, or you can cut it with a 1.5-inch strip and your quarter square triangle. And I sewed those first, frankly, because I didn't want to lose them. And so I'm going in and I'm pressing my chisels. And then I'm putting the pieces on this where I have the little double half square triangles that are going to go onto the other side of that flying geese unit. And as you notice, when I'm pressing them as I go along. And by pressing them as I go along, when I go to match them up where I need them to be, I have them all perfectly lined up. Now, another way I could have done this, remember when I said before that my back pinwheel didn't stand out so well? Maybe I should have made my front, my top ones, all dark and make my back one a medium color, something that is kind of more muted. And so, again, the beauty of cutting out just one at a time gives me a chance to explore with this before I dig in and do some serious cutting. So I'm going in, I'm walking into the machine with all of my units, finishing on the last of the flying geese units, the last of the chisels, doing my pressing as I go along with my point-to-point turner, keeps my work cleaner, more organized, and then I'm going ahead and sewing my other flying geese onto the other sides of them. See what's happening there? So I have that double quarter square triangle, those 2 tinies that I'm putting on that one side. Now the secret to figuring out what size those needed to be is those quarter square triangles, I had to use a cube that was half the size of my cube that I used for the main flying geese. And so to that point, I had to go with a 4-inch cube to pair up with my 8-inch. I could have taken this, paired it up with a 12-inch cube and a 6-inch cube. I could also pair it up with a 16-inch cube and an 8-inch cube. Some of that depends on your tolerance of what size you'll work with, but another part of it is that you have to look at your scraps that you have, what you're working with, or if you're working with a full piece. Now, as I did that pressing that I went in there, I really found that the first time I did it, all my seams opposed each other beautifully, and I think that that's an important piece. So when I did those flying geese, I did the left flying goose the way I normally do it, and I pressed it towards the sky. But on the other side, I had to press it towards the goose because I had a lot more seams in there with those 2 tiny quarter square triangles in there. However, to that end, it made all the seams lock together perfectly. So now I'm putting 2 of my quadrants together while I'm still sending a piece through the back to finish it up. I always like to try to plan my work a little bit, and I do this planning as I'm sitting there so that I can be working on a piece while I'm putting together a block. That prevents me from having to stop and start all the time. And so then I get it together. Look what's happening here. There we go. I'm going to do my pressing, turn it right sides together. I'm very pleased with how the block turned out. Actually, the block that I'm looking at, it looks really great, but as I looked at it when I was starting to talk through this video, it occurs to me that I could do it the other way. Is that I could do that where I could make the pinwheel, the shadow pinwheel underneath, a light, and make my little pinwheels up there dark. So it would have a great impact as well. And that'll be dictated more by how much fabric I have. And, as I go through this, I also am a little bit inclined to make this into using my 12-inch cube and my 6-inch cube together because I think it would be a really good impact. And the finished block would be 12 inches. Now, this finished block in particular is 8 inches because I made it with the 8-inch cube. So there are 3 kinds of chains that I show you in the instructions. This is one of them that I put on a quilt, a kid's quilt that went with a panel. And as you can see with this, I put those together as 4 patches. The 4 patches are cut with the square on point die. And then they're put together with quarter squares, and I sewed them together into triangles as you see the lines on your chart. And for this one in particular, I had this panel, and we first surrounded it with tiny tumblers, or with the regular size tumblers. I think they're 4-inch finish. And it just wasn't a really cool impact. It got it done, it worked, and it was fine. But then I came back and put this very impactful border on there. Now this panel, I didn't have any companion fabrics with it, so I just went and put together black fabric with the colors, the solid colors from elements in there. And then I was able to put this border on the outside edge. Now this quilt is all layered, ready to be quilted, and it has cuddle on the back of it. And it's just going to be a very straight line to do. But I love what that border did is it made it look really dynamic. And I'm excited about getting into this. Now, this one kind of stirred up the next ones that you're going to see. And these are using a triple border. And so this is a quilt that we had done for Sewing Social several years ago. We called it Backroads Drifter. And what it did was it combined blocks that people got from other stores across the country, and we combined it with Kay England's pattern called Hobo Quilt. And then I crafted a border for around the outside edge of this, and that border was the triple border. This is my first time tackling a triple border, but I did it the traditional way where you usually sew the squares and things like that, and you sew them on a diagonal and put them together, and it took literally forever. And then as I was working with it, I had this discovery that those units are technically can be put together into triangles and make this so much easier to piece together. So this was the second one that we had done, and as you can see, we have a spacer around the outside edge. The first time we did it, I tried to figure out all the math on it, and our sample maker, Betty Jo, made it, and when it came back, it was like it had a life of its own. It was really dynamic, and we had a deadline to get, and I'll show you what happened with it, but basically we didn't put in the right number of units, which led me to rewrite the pattern so that you are actually building most of that border and you're measuring it, and then you're deciding what size of coping strips on this. So this quilt in particular on mine, I had to put coping strips that were different sizes on it. Now this was Backroads Drifter done in another colorway, and this is one that we did for Mystery Monday. And as you can see, I have the same border where I have the light fabrics around the outside edge, and the inside of those pieces were 9-inch squares, and we used Judy Martin's brilliant star designs that we've done a few times in the store, and it was a Mystery Monday, and we'll address that here. We'll look at what some other finishes look like, because it is a great scrappy quilt. Good thing to use up a lot of things. This was the first one that we did. And because we had so many problems with it, you can see what I did was I chopped off that outer edge. And so I had to cut that all off, so I had the picture for it. And it worked, but that's when I'm going to talk to you about where you end up with those issues where you get bias edges around the outside edge if you do that. Done is better than done perfect, and this one is done, and it was a happy gift for a young couple getting married, and I am sure they adore it, and it's not bad, it's done. And I learned a lot, and that's what made me excited about this. And so we went ahead and we brought this lesson into a Mystery Monday. And the finishes that people had from this were absolutely amazing. People felt so good about what they did, but the great thing is this pattern allowed us the chance to use all kinds of fabrics and put them together. And some people worked with a tightly curated colorway, and this is the great thing about Mystery Monday. And as we're looking forward to our next ones, we always work this way because I want you to be able to use the fabric that you love, but you don't know what to do with it. And so these were pieces that people worked on. Now, as we worked on these blocks in particular for this lesson, and we will look at bringing this back as a class in the future, but as they worked on the blocks, I had them piecing the 4-patch units as you see in your instructions. So they were piecing those as they went along, building the individual blocks in the middle and then putting the frames on them. So the border was 90% done when they got the quilt done. They didn't know what they were going to do with all those 4 patches. Then we were able to show them how to put them together into this most amazing border. And you can see there was such a celebration of color. This one in particular, our friend Amy made this out of fabric that she didn't like. She had won some fat quarters somewhere, and she said it's now become one of her favorite Mystery Mondays that we've ever done. And it's a really great way to put that fabric together. Of course, the key to this is also having a background that sings well, that is really harmonious with what you're doing. There's not a secret recipe to that. Sometimes it's just putting the fabric out there and choosing. And as you can see, you could put mediums in these fabrics and it didn't have any difference. Wendy put this one together. I love what she did by combining black with this. And it truly is everything but the kitchen sink in those blocks. And it really has a dynamic look to it. Good job. I love what happened on this one. She used the black background for this, and then she didn't have enough to use for her settings, or she chose to do it this way. And so she did her quarter square triangles out of a melon color. And I think it has great impact to it. And as you can see, coping strips that people are putting on here, a coping strip didn't have to be to make it fit perfectly. Sometimes it was to enlarge it. And again, when you put coping strips, so that's that mustard color on that border, it helps to space it out a little bit further. Now, in this one, I want you to notice, I showed this earlier, but the background they used for it is green. It's a light green. This might be a fabric that you already have, or it might be a fabric that you choose for this, and that's what gives us the courage. Now, this example is showing what it looks like when you start piecing that out. And so this person who worked on this laid it out on their design wall so they could look at that and see what it would be doing before they went further. I am sure you're inspired to sew even more now. Now let's look at this outer border. Those outer borders are square on point units, and you'll see those sizes are a little different than what we're used to. That's because when we do them, I'm cutting here and I cut up a bunch of fabrics to start experimenting with some colors, and I cut them with my square on point. And I learned something new when I was doing this. I always learn something when I teach you something. I always like to make sure I can teach you. So with these guys, I'm going ahead and putting them together randomly. And the random was effective because I didn't get enough fabrics out. And again, these were for my first test stitch outs because I want to make sure that I'm going in the right direction. So I'm using that little flower cutter. I love that. And then when I go ahead and press them out, I noticed on these, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing. So notice I've got a 4-patch there, and I did not press that out first. And what I found on this time was if I started at that front, at the top part for this 4-patch, I drop my needle, and then I position my bottom, and I position my seam so that my top seam is going up and my bottom seam is coming towards me. I did not have to press those until I got the 4-patch entirely put together. It was a little bit of a game changer. Now, I wouldn't do this for everything, but in this one, since I'm doing steady 4-patches in here, and as you can see, I'm starting to pick them up randomly and put them into the machine. And then I'll go back and cut them out into 2 sets of 2s and then put them together this 4-patch. And it sped it up a little bit. I mean, it's not a big game changer, but I go ahead and start cutting them out that way. And now I do all of my pressing with my point-to-point turner when I have it as a full 4-patch. Now my goal when I'm making these 4-patches is to make this as scrappy as possible. Now there I have one where I sewed a fabric right side up, and so I need to unsew it with that cool technique of seam ripping. Seam ripping isn't nearly as hard as if you're doing it the right way, and there is a right way to do it, and I've shown it in the videos. But notice here again, I'm bossing that seam on the top so it's going away from me in the bottom seam so it's coming towards me, and I'm surprised they're locking together beautifully. But the key is making sure that I'm dropping the needle in the top of that seam, And then as I come towards myself, I make sure I push one seam away and one seam towards me. And so as I did that, then I was able to get it to be controlled. And these are just 4 patches that I'm going to be sewing a lot of these. And again, this is something, if you decide to use this technique, in this one in particular, I'm exploring. I have a lot of this blue fabrics and they're not going away. And I've already made 4 quilts with them. And so I really need to make these into something because I still love these blues. They're still very popular, but I have such a mishmash of them. So now what I'm doing is I'm doing the next unit, which is taking one of those square-on points, and I am attaching a quarter square triangle to both sides on 2 adjacent sides to it. And so I'm sewing both of these units together because this is going to comprise the border that I'm going to be putting on this. Oh, by the way, I haven't started this quilt other than doing that one test block. And so I wanted to make sure I showed you this. So now I'm putting my other quarter square triangle on the other side of these pieces. The other piece to not ironing these is those quarter square triangles are vulnerable because they're now a big quarter square triangle. And they're going to be our setting pieces. So we do not want to go to an iron. Many times I think people just iron things to death and they iron them too hard and they distort their work. So I'm going ahead and putting that other side on. By the way, if you've quit ironing in between, kudos to you. If you haven't, you might want to give it a try. It's kind of a thing that, people tell me again and again, tell us again and again, our team and our customers. It was hard to get used to, but it's a game changer. So now I'm taking out those triangle units. Now keep in mind, because I've added those 2 quarter squares on the left and the right of that are adjacent to each other, this is now a quarter square triangle. However, the cool thing is that the square is the point of that. So now I'm going to lay the border out. And you can see I'm going to start putting my 4 patches into squares that are going to go next to each other. And I'm not going to worry about if I have a good mixture of fabric in these or wherever they're going. I'm not even going to bother with that. Now I'm going to show you how we're going to turn a corner on this one. There are lots of ways to turn corners. I only provided one in this lesson. As we look at next year, our next Mystery Mondays, we're going to be looking at some other ones. Now I'm putting that square with the 2 flying geese, with the 2 quarter square triangles on either side adjacent to these pieces. Now when I sew these together into the sections, I'm going to sew them with a 4 patch with that quarter square triangle on either side of it, and then I'm going to sew the big diagonals. You can see the beauty of this is that you now don't have to sew all those little pieces diagonally. And so you're going to be sewing them together into 3s. The great thing about this is if I was doing it diagonally, for example, left to right, top to bottom, then I could actually sew those together and I could change my mind over where everything went. And you can see because you now have so many of those squares that are coming together, you're going to start noticing that if you don't have enough mixture of fabrics for this technique, for this triple border, it starts to look the same and it starts to look really flat and you really struggle with things being right next to each other. So let's look at the next pieces. So there I've got that and I've turned my corner. And like I said, there are many ways to turn the corner. This is one that I'm going to be showing you. And so when I go ahead and I put 2 squares up there, at that point on the left and the right side of those 2 squares, I just have to put a quarter square triangle in there. Now when I sew this onto the borders of a quilt, a lot of times I will sew on everything there, and then these pieces that are out there in that half square triangle that I build out there are going to be sewn on the very last. So I sew those corners on in the very last technique. Just an option. Now that we have that one a little bit more settled in, let's look at another fun border. I have seen this before, and this is my first time playing with it, and I am really excited to bring it to you. I used the same scraps that I was working at in the last one, and then I chose one background for the whole thing because it really has to have that to go in there. Now, as you look at this, I have the darker, the blue triangles. Those are quarter square triangles, And then the background, the big pieces are the half square triangles or the large half square. Now on the far right side, that is a chisel. And it wasn't shown anywhere, but I've discovered that's what would work. And then in the upper left side, that's a small half square triangle. So it fit right onto that. So you can make this any size. So what I'm doing with this when I sew it together, I'm sewing it together in this progression. So I started with my chisel and attached it to just one side of that quarter square triangle. And then I'm attaching a quarter square triangle above the chisel. And now what I've done is I've created a great space to the right where I will be able to add in my large half square triangle. And this unit will work with a lot of cube combinations. And so when we look at this, and then we've got that piece. Now, the tricky part about this when I looked at it is like, it doesn't seem intuitive to do this, but I'm adding another quarter square triangle atop that half square triangle. That leaves space for my half square triangle, large half square triangle to the left. Now I'm adding another quarter square triangle to the top of that half square triangle. Voila, look what happens there. I have space on the right side to add another large half square triangle. And so I'm progressing up the chain of this. And so then I can keep going, and now I'm going to add that half square triangle, another quarter square triangle atop that one, which leaves me the space on the left side for a large half square triangle. And then before I go on any further, I'm putting another quarter square triangle atop that half square triangle. You can see where this gets a little meditative. You'd be able to, get in a groove on this. And all it is it's just your quarter square triangle from your cube paired with your large half square triangle, the chisel. Now, if you didn't have the chisel, of course, you could just sew a half square triangle in there and chop it down. I'd still make sure I have that angles cube, because you can see there's been lots of opportunities to show you why you're going to want those extra pieces. They're very usable. And so on this one, I'm keeping on going up there. Now, when this ends, you have a couple of choices. Your top thing is when we finish it out, I'm showing you how to finish it out so that it's flat on the top and flat on the bottom. That means that you could put corners on there, just cornerstones on a quilt. You could use this as a table runner. You could use this as a sashing between blocks. There is a lot of opportunities in this one. And in this event that we're doing, you just saw something brand new to me and brand new to you, and we're taking it to the limit. Now, if you notice on this top left, what I'm going to do is put a small half square triangle. That's your number 5 die. And we're going to put that in there. And you can cut these out traditionally as well with your specialty rulers. So let's look at sewing this together, because what I'm going to do is show you how I learned how to do this. I always learn best with my hands. So I start off with my chisel, and then I go ahead and send it through. Now, and this time I'm doing this where I'm actually cutting my thread in between so that I can keep working in this. That was a little annoying to me because I had to clean up my work quite a bit. So there I've put on my first big half square triangle, and I'm pressing it out, and I kept pressing all the way up. And I found that it pressed well to press it most of the time towards the light fabric. It turned out really square and flat and beautiful. And I found that it was better off to, when I was pressing things, or when I was sewing things, when I sewed those double quarter square triangles on, I always made sure that I turned my work over. And that's why this is a little hard for you to see, because I'm turning my work over, because I wanted to keep my eye on those seams rather than trying to sew it just like it normally looked, where I have the big blank piece in there. And again, I'm cutting in between these guys. I don't know. The only other way I could have done that differently was if I had enders and leaders to send in there, but that almost doubles my time to do this. This took me about a total of 15 minutes to cut and sew. It's an incredible way to get a lot of things done fast, and it was really, really nice to put it together this way. The size of this piece actually ends up to be, it's 1.5 times the width, so it's probably 6 inches. And that chart is in your instructions. It's a 6-inch finish, but look at how beautiful it is. I'm really pleased with the way this came out. It just has a really beautiful impact to it, and I really loved sewing this one, and I'm going to be doing it again. Now, if you were to make this with your 12-inch cube, for example, this would be absolutely a full table runner, and it just has a lot of good opportunities in it. The other piece to think about is that this, and I didn't see any finished ones. I looked for quite a bit, but I saw a lot of times where people started this but didn't do anything with it. The other one is that when I was doing research on this, most of the time this was done as paper piecing, and you do not want to do that if you can avoid it. And plus it's just going to take you much less time. Now there was a paper pieced one that I found out there that was really great. It was great colors. I loved what they did with the colors on this. And it has a lot of dynamic, but it was really, really tiny. As you can see, that's a rotary cutter. I believe it might be a bigger rotary cutter, but these are tiny little things. And this is usually where people say, that's why I paper piece. And so they paper piece to do those tiny things. However, what you're looking at right now, if you love doing little things, you could do this with a 4-inch cube and it would give you the same impact and same elements out of it. And you can see they were playing with the colors, and it's something that you can buy the paper piecing for, but I really want you to look at, you have the tools in your toolbox. This is what that paper piecing looks like. Now, if you're a paper piecing person, um, go to it. But I know that, like, this is why we really want to get into using AccuQuilt more. And these are some colorways that I found out there of this same element. Now, I did find that this one was a table runner, and this is what I was telling you about with doing this with a 12-inch cube. This is a great way to do this as a table runner. You can see it has a very modern look. This is when they're playing with colors. This is pretty common to do. I mean, we like doing that. And I like the next one because it shows putting together this piece with another border on either side of it. And you can see, like, if you want to make a square quilt into a rectangle, these are the sort of things that you can do that are totally within your realm. And you can see this one breaks apart the pieces. Great places for scraps. Wonderful things. Now, I did come across this where somebody had taken elements of this and just very base elements and had put them into a quilt and set them together with standard blocks of fabric. And so you can see that. And again, a lot of times this happens when people are just playing with designs. And the difference between what they're doing and maybe what you think about doing is they're just putting it into something and finishing it. Done is better than done perfect. And we talk about that a lot. And I think that this has been a great exploration to look at some different things. Now we're going to look at some of your friends' blocks and elements. There have been a few people who have been working through Mystery Monday with us who have been sending pictures to our Friends of Inspired to Sew page. And you can see they're exploring this. And the feedback that I've gotten on this particular Mystery Monday, while we didn't work on one quilt, we worked very heavily on elements that you can use that are not only part of your AccuQuilt elements, but they're also things that you can cut with specialty rulers. They're great pieces for borders, for sashings, for taking apart a block. Each session that we did, I showed you how to take something apart and make it into a block, a border, a sashing, a piece that stands all by itself. Several people did this where they started putting these elements around panels. When we work with borders, it's always a great time to play with panels. And I think there's some really dynamic choices in here. And hopefully you're not afraid now of the parallelogram, the trapezoid, the half rectangles, and the bias triangles. As we look at what we're doing in our next year classes, for virtual classes, we will be offering 2 opportunities. We're going to be going back to doing our standard Mystery Monday, where we do it in 5 to 6 week sessions, 4 to 6 week sessions, depending on the project. Because mainly we found that a lot of people who said they wanted that element where they were able to do that, they realized that what we do is break it down into very manageable pieces. And what we find is that people are one of 2 camps. Either they do the project right before the next class, or they do it right after their previous class. And so we try to make that manageable. So we'll be doing 3 of those in 2026. and you're going to want to sign up for those. They're going to be great, the Standard Mystery Monday. However, doing this project the way we've done it and the Kona Block of the Month in 2025, what we learned is that there were people that really loved just doing something once a month. Therefore, we are going to offer a program called Cut It Up Club. And in Cut It Up Club, we will continue to work with conversions. We will continue to work with blocks per session. And we're going to be breaking things out, much like we did in this event that you're participating in, where you're going to do 1 to 2 blocks each month. And they will go into one finished quilt. So we have a finished quilt that you'll be doing with the teaching part of it. But we're also going to show you other things that you can do. So the pieces that you're looking at right now are the other things that people chose to do. And if you just want to do a quilt and still learn these techniques, Cut It Up Club is going to work great for you as well. And we'll offer it the same way that we're offering this program. I want to thank you for trusting us with investing your time and buying from Inspired to Sew. Your investment in our small company help us to keep providing you the best education that we can. And what we do is we want to work really diligently to inspire you to sew more. Our goal for Mystery Monday and Cut It Up Club is to help you to understand how to piece better, how to cut better. But our biggest goal is to help you to get through that fabric that you absolutely love. Whether you're a fat quarter buyer or you like buying 10-inch squares or you collect fabric from a wide variety of spaces, this is an answer for you. We also thank you in closing for referring our company to your friends and in other places, especially social media. It is through that trusted referral that we are able to keep offering you a program at the most reasonable pricing we can get. We want to thank you for being inspired to sew with us, and we look forward to even more adventures.